Today we're going to build this modern spider-inspired hall table out of ebonized red oak with hempwood drawer fronts and... I ran out of adjectives. Okay, in this shot you can see two templates that I made for myself for this project. A leg template and then another that represents half of the leg subassembly that we're going to put together. And I made these on my CNC, but I've shown on some other videos how I make them by hand. And in fact, Sean has a really good video where he goes over exactly how we do it in detail. Right, Sean? Yeah, I'll link it below. But anyhow, once I had those worked out, I grabbed another piece of red oak and started roughing out some chunks that would yield the pieces that I'd need. Okay, so with my chunks, I started laying out my pieces by tracing my template. And then I could head over to the bandsaw and rough those out. And when I fired it up, this happened. I didn't know that Sean likes to leave the saw untensioned, so it popped right off the wheel. And I didn't feel like fixing it, so I used his. Next, I'm going to grab my template and a plywood sled and go ahead and cut the edges of the leg that's going to connect to the stretcher. And actually, while I'm doing that, let's hop into SketchUp to go over the design in detail so that you'll have a better idea of what's going on. So as you already know, I've got templates for my leg as well as half of my entire subassembly piece. From the leg template, I'm going to create 4 hardwood leg pieces. Once we have those, we'll connect each pair with a stretcher, and then we'll use the other template to turn that into our final shape. And finally, once that's done, we'll connect those 2 subassemblies with 3 more stretchers. So we've got our roughed out legs, and next we're going to cut out the rectangles that we'll use for our stretchers, again leaving them totally blocky at this point. And then we can connect everything with some dominoes. Now, while these are drying, we can turn our attention back to the case panels that we glued up a few minutes back. So the first thing that I did after getting the panels out of the clamps was run them through the drum sander to clean them up a little bit. And then I could finalize their size by ripping the front and back edges and putting a 45-degree bevel along all of the ends. With that done, there's still a couple of things that we want to do before we glue anything up. And the first of those is cutting 4 dados in the top and bottom panels to accept 2 vertical partitions. And you may notice that these look really thin, and that's because, as you'll see in a minute, we're going to cut a tongue on the ends of the partitions. So basically only part of it goes into the groove rather than the entire thing, which just makes for a cleaner glue up. And finally, we're going to put this little inside bevel detail along the front edges of all 4 pieces. Then we can cut in some dominoes and glue up. And the dominoes, I'm sure, add a little bit of strength to a piece like this, but honestly, I think that they're pretty unnecessary, and really they're just here for alignment purposes. Now, while that dries, let's finish off the base. So the next morning, I unclamped my sub-assemblies, put on my beanie, tried to record a pro tip, and realized while editing that I didn't have any audio. Then I could take my larger template, trace it onto my glue up, rough it out on the bandsaw, and then use it to start template routing my final shape. With one sub-assembly done, I used the first one as a template to make the second one, since that's easier than using a half-sized template. And this way, no matter what, they're going to end up identical. And then we could cut some stretchers and assemble everything. Okay, so you'll remember a few minutes back we had cut those thin dados, and now we have to cut the tongues to slot into them. So really here, there's a few things that we need to pay attention to. First, the size of the area between the shoulder needs to be the same as the distance between our top and bottom panel. Next, the tongue needs to be shorter than the dado is deep. And finally, the tongue needs to stop shy of hitting the end of the dado. Hey, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to take a second to show you guys my quarantine hair. What do you think? Should I simply keep it or should I simply shave? And speaking of simply shave, let's also thank SimpliSafe for sponsoring this video. So SimpliSafe makes home security systems that are easy to set up and intuitive to use and make sure that your home is safe. So they protect like a pro thanks to a variety of reasons. Things like having their systems professionally monitored 24/7 so that in the event of a break-in, they receive highest priority police dispatch. Additionally, they cover the home comprehensively both inside and out thanks to products like their video doorbell, cameras, glass break sensors, and everything else. And those are just a few of the reasons that they're the #1 expert recommended home security system and why over 3 million people rely on them daily, including me. Now, we've personally had our system for over 1.5 years now, and it's been great. We started off with window and door sensors, glass break sensors, cameras, and the basics, and have since expanded to include the video doorbell and most recently the Simply Safe lock, which has been really cool. It does things like verify that our house is locked using a timer and lets us keep track of who comes and goes and even set unique codes for special circumstances. So if you've been thinking about getting a home security system, or even if you have a system that you think could be better, you owe it to yourself to give Simply Safe a look. They have really fair, honest pricing and no contracts or hidden fees, so you can opt out at any time. So put a system together, give it a look, and see if it might be a better fit for you. All right, thanks Simply Safe. Simply Safe. Thanks. All right, by the next day our case was dry and we could start fitting some boxes. And I'm going to be using Bloom's soft close slides, which are slightly trickier to install than some of the other hardware, but also quite a bit nicer as they're highly adjustable and you also don't see them from the side since they sit up and under the bottom panel. So once I had determined how big each box would need to be, I just had to make sure to stay really organized as I cut out all of my pieces. And again, if you want to see a detailed video about how to calculate box sizes and install hardware like this, we have a dedicated video on Sean's channel, which again I'll link to below. One thing I will say though is if you are going to use these drawer slides, this little rockler jig for drilling all of the holes in your boxes is worth its weight in gold. The instructions from Bloom are pretty specific about where the holes need to go, and this makes it way easier to do it quickly and accurately. Hey, Sean. Sean. Can you get back to work, please? Nothing. Okay, we're on the home stretch, but now's a good time to do a little cleanup work before we get to the drawer faces. Okay, hempwood. So even though this is a relatively small part of the overall project, it kind of dictated a lot of what I ended up doing. It's the reason that I finished it in black. It's the reason that the drawer boxes are relatively small. And basically, I started with this and kind of designed around it. Now, this next part's going to sound like a sponsored ad read, but it's not. The truth is, my friend Danny, who's the marketing director at the local lumberyard that I go to, Real Lumber, read an article about hempwood about a year ago, contacted the people producing it, and jumped on a plane to Kentucky and started a partnership. A few months later, I was in the store, we got to chatting, and he asked me if I wanted to try it out. And, well, here we are. Now, you guys know that I'm not a big fan of highly figured woods. Not that there's anything wrong with them, it's just personal preference. Hence the reason that I'm using it for such a small focal point in this build. But that said, I do like the philosophy behind hempwood. I don't know any of this for fact, but from what I've been told, it's really eco-friendly and sustainable, and I think that it can go from seed to cultivation in 5 months. And for as much as this can be objective, it does make for a pretty unique and eye-catching look. It's also just kind of random luck that Real Lumber happens to be my local place, and they happen to be the only lumberyard stocking this stuff at this time, at least as far as I know. And it's not like they're some huge company. I mean, they've been around for a long time, but they're basically a family-run local place. In fact, Danny, who's part of the family, set up an e-commerce site specifically for selling hempwood, and I think it's the first time that they've ever done anything like this. So again, this isn't a sponsored video by Hempwood or Real Lumber, just kind of a random but interesting opportunity to try something new that fell into my lap. Special thanks to Justin, Mike, Yancey, Joseph, Red the Beard, Ivan, Peyton, Ryan, Jorgen, Isaac, Julio, Tony, Patrick, Brian, and the rest of my Patreon members for making these videos possible. I can honestly say that you all have made such a huge difference in my life and my ability to do this full time. So for all of the support and for everything that you've given to me, thank you. Seriously. So if you want to support the show too and snag a 4 Eyes shirt, check out the link in the description and see if it's right for you. And as always, no pressure. See you next time.